I think it would make sense to ask you, Rafat, this is a global pandemic that we're going through, but do you have a plan to protect yourself from the murder hornets?
From the murder hornets. Explain what that is.
I've only seen some headlines, but there's apparently a kind of bee that is on the Pacific Northwest, and I found it kind of amusing that now is quite a opportune time for the murder hornets to descend on.
Yeah,
on our
yeah,
people.
sure, yeah, and here in New York, it's the allergy season, so on top of the actual virus, it's the allergy season. So yeah, great timing.
Hey Unlock listeners, this episode's brought to you by Point Central, the leader in business-grade smart property solutions designed for rental properties. Point Central's technology helps you increase property safety, reduce operational costs, and improve guest satisfaction. Head over to pointcentral.com/VRMB to learn more. And Rental Guardian. With over 1 million property owners, thousands of property managers, hundreds of software partners and counting, Rental Guardian is arguably the most complete and trusted travel and damage protection platform in the industry. You can learn more at rentalguardian.com. And Breezeway. Breezeway's operations platform makes it easy to ensure quality, safety, and cleanliness across your properties so you can deliver an amazing guest experience every time. Head over to breezeway.io to learn more. Hello, Unlock listeners, and hello to my friends on the other end of the line. How you doing?
Hey, Matt. How's it going?
Aloha.
Aloha. Hola to you, too. Everything good in your neck of the woods?
To be honest, it's kind of a rough night last night.
Why?
We have about 1 million fireflies, and since we're the only lights, anywhere around, they're all attacking the house, and I don't know if they're small fireflies or a different kind of beetle, but we've had thousands and thousands of insects trying to get inside. It's a little crazy.
Like, I'm envisioning just a bioluminescent-looking wave of insects lighting up and trying to assault your home. Is that actually what it looks like?
It does. From the house out, it looks beautiful. You have all the valley and near the ocean with the fireflies, but they're getting everywhere. We were trying to sleep last night. I had them crawling on me, in my hair, under the sheets, under my pajamas. It was just chaotic.
Okay, well.
Yeah, to be honest, it reminded me a little bit of all the murder hornet hysteria going on in the U.S., although, of course, the fireflies aren't murdering us. But I guess there's been a lot of...
They're slowly killing our nerves.
They're slowly killing our nerves,
Torturing us.
They're driving us crazy. But I guess not everybody in the U.S. is suffering from the murder hornets. I noticed you asked Rafat today about them, and he hadn't even heard of the murder hornet.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised. When we did this episode, they were sort of headline news, at least in the Pacific Northwest. And since Rafat is all in that media space, I figured he would know about it. But turns out he just specializes in travel. He didn't even know about the murder hornets just yet.
Maybe he focuses on actually important things, unlike the rest of us here. But what an exciting thing to have him on the podcast. I mean, I get Skift in my mailbox every day, and then all of a sudden, boom.
Yeah, I was super psyched to have this conversation. I learned a whole lot. Perhaps my favorite soundbite of the entire season comes in the middle of this episode when Rafat says that he believes professional vacation rentals are going to be positioned better than any other accommodation coming out of this pandemic. When I listened to that, I lifted my arms up with excitement. And in general, he really does have a wonderful perspective on our little niche as it fits into the broader travel segment. We've gotten to watch Skift and all of their individual team players, of course, evolve and grow over the years. So I think this is a nice chance for our listeners to get that top-down perspective. Any other heads ups for people that they should keep an ear out for listening to this episode?
Well, I actually have a question for you. Will you explain his use of the word metabolism for me? I've noticed you've started using it as well. and I don't fully understand the context.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I used it in text messages now all the time. He basically said that one of his priorities about his news company, media company, is the need for high metabolism. That is to say, producing content and sharing it and distributing it immediately, and then doing that over and over and over again. And the opposite of that would be, producing something and having it sit on the shelf and become stale. But he basically attributed that metabolism to his success over the years. And I thought it was a great bit of advice for any content creators out there. I'm just using it nonstop now, like it's my own. One of Rafat's other big emphases is on email lists, which is really great advice for any small business to communicate regularly with your supporters. Tammy, do you subscribe to my newsletter?
No.
What?
I
You
don't think so. No.
Kind of offended.
You
Why?
shouldn't be. I'd rather listen to your podcast and call you and all that.
Okay. Well, like I said, email lists. Let's segue into this podcast. And I know that Rafat is doing it from the vanity in his bedroom, which is a unique place to do a podcast. Should we hit the play button? Rafat Ali is the CEO and founder of Skift, which is a business information company founded on travel. Skift's one of those platforms that if you're in travel, you'll almost certainly know about it. But if you are not in travel, you probably won't, which is actually a great testament to Rafat's philosophy on specialization. Today, we're going to talk about the impact of the pandemic on the future of travel. We're going to talk about the role of short-term rentals from Rafat's top-down perspective. And we're going to see how we can apply some of his media company growth tactics to your small business. Rafat, welcome.
Thank you, Matt, for having me, and thank you for all your support of Skift over the years. I and the team really appreciates it.
Well, I have been admiring your work, and I oftentimes ask myself, what would Skift do to make some little decisions about my own company? And we're going to talk about a lot of the amazing stuff that you've been working on over the years, but I'd like to get this started by asking what your day is like right now.
Well, it's, I'm guessing, not too unlike a lot of other people these days in their homes. I have a 5-year-old son, so I have the morning duty. My wife has the evening duty. That's how we have distributed it. So he usually wakes up at 7:30, which is early, unfortunately, for working from home. And so and obviously we're teaching with schools at home. So it's, I guess, the mornings are focused on him. I start work right about 9:30, even though obviously emails and stuff are done by then. And it's sitting in front of a computer in my bedroom for most part, in our bedroom for most part, on my wife's, what is it called, where you put on makeup, the desk that you put the makeup on.
Oh, you're asking the wrong guy.
So
Like, yeah,
yeah,
I know what you're
so
talking about.
basically that's my work desk. Because my wife, she works from home, she's downstairs, and so she has the prime spot there. She's had for years. So that's, and then tons of phone calls. Actually, there are more video calls, and then interacting with the team on Slack. We use Slack internally, so quick calls with different members of the team, checking in now that we're all virtual. We went virtual, much like a lot of other people around mid-March, and have not gone to office. I live in Queens, and office is in Manhattan, so it's only 25 minutes subway ride away. But it feels like a whole different world. I think subway will be the biggest psychological barrier in terms of the fear of people coming out again, just because of the nature of what it is.
And are you you're a member of the Bald Men's Club? Are you keeping up with your grooming? Because I right now look like a very scary clown.
So the good news is, like, this is one of the few times where we don't have to give a shit about haircuts. So we've been self haircutting our lack of hair for, I don't know, however many years. 10 for me, it's about 15 years now.
We were made for
We're
this.
made for this. So I actually have been, believe it or not, keeping up with my grooming. At least it gives me. I don't have much. I'm not a very well put together. It's not like I'm like on top of it every day anyway. But I'm glad that I'm keeping up with it. I take a shower in the morning. You know, we had a casual dress for office anyway, so I'm wearing that. So I'm not going to say much has changed in that, and definitely keeping up on my grooming.
Well, I respect that. I'm the complete opposite. I'm a total mess right now. But that's the beauty of this platform that we're using. You don't have to look at me. You can only answer my questions. And I have just been really enjoying watching both your and Skift's growth over the years. And I never actually had a chance, and I'm guessing our listeners haven't either, to just go back a little bit to early Rafat, Rafat, pronounced properly. I know that you were rejected by most of the journalistic schools that you were applying,
Yeah,
and that you eventually started what became your first media company with the simple power of blogging.
yeah.
Walk us through why that is still kind of such a poignant first step.
Yeah, well, thank you for noticing that. I'm an immigrant story. I guess I don't know if do you technically call students come in and who stay here immigrants. I don't know. That's a question that I need to answer. Um, but I came here as a student from India. My family is Indian. I'm Indian. I came here when from India. I came to Indiana, which is completely unlike each other as you can imagine. This is 99, so even 20, 21 years ago. And but it was a great stepping stone to America in general to be able to learn while at college. And I went to school for new media journalism back when it was called new media. This is what I did at IU at the journalism school. And um, and then blogging had just started back then. So 99, 2000 is when I started a personal blog. Blogging had just come out as a form and a whatever tech. I was a journalist and quickly saw what the format of blogging allows you to do, which is have the metabolism of the web, meaning fast paced, quick, churning in terms of news or coverage of a topic. And you can do it in a reverse chronological fashion, which is what blogs were, which meant that freshness mattered. After I came out of school, I moved to New York City and worked a couple of .coms. This was when I came out, the first internet bubble had burst and 9/11 hadn't happened. It was that weird year in between when we knew things were going bad. We just didn't know how bad they will become. So I
Mm-hmm.
started this blog in that time. 9/11 happened, was here in New York City, went through those phases of layoffs, etc., of the companies that I worked at, and then just started blogging as a way to showcase my skills as a journalist. I can cover this sector. I was focused on covering the business of media advertising in the internet sector, so to speak. And so um, just started writing, reporting on what was happening in the media, digital media sector. This is the depths of the recession after 9/11. Turns out I was the only one covering it because everybody else, after the first internet bubble, thought that it was a fad. Turns out I had the right timing there, and it went from blogger in their pajamas in their bedrooms, those stories that came out back then, if you remember.
I do.
And then it turned into a media company. So blogging as the platform, we were so paid content was a blog that turned into a media company. Was really the first blog media company of its type, taking blogs as an underlying mechanism to cover a sector. For me, it was the business of digital media, how media, entertainment, information sectors were going digital, and it grew from one person to about 20. So the economy came back. I was in LA at that point, and we were covering US, UK, and India. But these were three countries that I had connections with. We did similar to Skift. We did news, we did research, we did conferences, and so I basically spent my life going deep into sectors, and I think that that's sort of my expertise is to go deep into sectors and be able to connect dots across different parts of a larger sector that others may not have seen before. And if you followed the Skift journey, you've probably seen that we cover all of travel but also are able to connect dots between different sectors, which historically hadn't been looked at it that way. And so that's a quick update to where I am today.
That's really, I think, a good bit of guidance for anybody who's trying to develop a voice in the repetition of blogging or articulating the thoughts that are in your mind. It takes practice.
It does. Metabolism matters.
Yeah, that metabolism, I actually had never heard it phrased that way, but that's exactly what it is. And over time, you do begin to develop sort of these crystallized thoughts. You sold that company.
Correct.
And you went on a travel binge, and you came up with the idea for Skift, as I understand it. So my main question from that sort of transition/crossroads period of your life was, what do you think it is about travel that helps form new ideas?
So, so I sold in 2008, left in 2010. I sold my first company to Guardian Newspapers, which is based in UK, the famous Guardian News company. And so I was doing my previous company for 8 years, and I was sitting in a hole, literally sitting, not literally, but almost sitting in a hole, had not seen the world. Even though I was born in UK, grew up in India, was now living in the US, I hadn't really traveled much outside of, going for living in these places. And I, after 8 years of blogging in front of a computer, I wanted to see the world. That was going to be the next phase of my life. And, unfortunately, a bit like Eat, Love, Pray, whatever that book was, I had a similar journey. I was newly single, wanted to travel the world. I hadn't read books in a while because, it's just one of those phases I went through. And then I read in about 6 months since I started traveling, I read about 50 books. And I kept a track of all the books, Goodreads, which existed back then. I'm talking 2010 to 2012. And still exists as a repository where you can keep your list of the books that you're reading, etc. And I could see my mind, now that I go back and look at it, my mind expand in the tenor of the books that I read, from like very generic travel memoirs to the geopolitical meets travel type books to other big issues in the world. And it was only possible because I think travel allowed me that sort of sense of expansion and having a longer term horizon and having a wider lens on life. And I've always said sort of Skift has allowed me a wider lens on life. And so I think travel allowed me to do that. And my philosophy on travel was very simple, which is, if you land at an airport in any place and people take a right turn out of the airport, I took a left turn. And so go away from people. And even though you'll come back to people, start by going away from where the crowds are. And then you'll eventually come back to the crowds because you need some comfort at the end of this if you've roughed it out for the first part of your trip. Not that the idea of Skift came in my travels. Like, it's not like one day I was in the middle of Mongolia and said, I know how to solve the travel industry's news problems, because that, doesn't. Typically, that's how a lot of travel startups are born, by the way, and that's why they fail.
Oh, yes.
Because everybody thinks that their travel problem is a problem everybody has. How widely I traveled and sort of intersections of travel that I saw with different parts of the world is what at least defined my sensibility on how we look at have a wide lens on travel. So long story short, travel allowed me to come up with the idea of Skift, even though it wasn't like one moment.
And I like how you added in the layer of reading too, because I'm now thinking that so many times when I've been traveling and I happen to pick up a book, and it's not like even somebody gave it to me or it wasn't on a bestseller list, but I'll pick up a book and the circumstances plus the page that I'm reading and a slow hunch that I've had over time begins to become clearer for me. And it's just kind of like a magical thing. I talk a lot about sustainability in my vacation rental presentations, but I tend to focus mostly on the offense. How do we generate more bookings through a more diversified marketing portfolio that depends less on any single given lead channel and therefore makes our business more sustainable, keeps us around a little longer. But in focusing on the offense, I noticed I tend to overlook some of the equally, if not more important and arguably obvious defensive sustainability best practices. Things like protecting our revenue, protecting our guests, protecting the properties that we manage from risk. Rental Guardian delivers best-in-class travel protection, damage protection, and liability protection for over 600 managers throughout the world. And if you want to see the sustainability of the future, check out their new Master Cancel program, which allows you to offer flexible terms and conditions, but also to protect the hard-earned revenue that you have generated. This is really cool stuff. Head over to rentalguardian.com to learn more. And remember, sustainability isn't just about the offense. Sometimes it's about protecting the home front. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, babe, you read my mind and know what I like. When you do go the opposite direction from people, when you do begin to build these independent and unique ideas, I've heard you talk about Skift from the early days as you wanting it to be the best. And I think in a couple instances you used the most influential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you help vacation rental professionals understand the power of choosing a distinction like that as your compass versus perhaps not being super, super strict to being the first or the only or the best?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big, that's a very deep question, by the way, Matt.
Thank you. Or sorry.
No, I've always believed that you have to create your own white space in the world. And for instance, in media and travel, we launched on July 30th, 2012. So actually our 8th anniversary is coming up. Had you gone out in the market in the travel industry on July 29th, the day before, and asked people, is there a need for another travel media industry news site or publication or trade, whatever? Guaranteed 9 out of 10 would have said no, because
Right.
it just wasn't a thing. Nobody had thought about it. In fact, a lot of people said no to us in terms of investment, et cetera, et cetera. By the way we look to travel, the way by which we look at travel as an intensely curious, high metabolism output on travel is what we have as a company. We created our own white space. And I've always believed, to sort of answer your question on voice and distinction, is that however crowded a sector is, however crowded any part of the market is, there's always space. I don't subscribe to the philosophy, especially for small businesses like ours and the companies that you talk to, is that there's always space to create your own white space through how you look at the world differently, to how you do things differently, to how you communicate differently, to your actual output, the quality of your output. So I'm a big believer in creating your own white space. I guess part of me goes back to the immigrant part, which is you come here and you make your own space in the country, and there are a lot of things wrong with America, but there's still that possibility of the American dream, which I still believe in many ways, even though it's broken in so many different ways. And that's a whole different podcast we can go into.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, creating your own space and us having a point of view. I mean, if you've read Skift, you've seen the Skift take. So Skift take is this thing below headlines, is the first thing usually people read, is our view on the story. The word take has been spoiled these days because takes
And it's also like one sentence. It's all distilled down into a drop. Yeah.
one sentence, distilled down one sentence. So we had that from the start, and it was really three of us outsiders trying to cover the travel industry, and we had opinions on it or takes on it from day one. Not all of them were correct. Not all of them are still correct, and these are our distillation of what the world is. But at least we had a point of view, and I think that's what established us from the start, is to have
Mm-hmm.
a point of view backed up by reporting, I mean, it's not, it's the work of our journalists that intensely report on the industry stuff that you read. I know you've talked to a few of our reporters over the years as well, and so um, i- we have opinion analysis on the industry, but it's based on talking to the industry. We don't exist without talking to all of you.
Um, One of the other things that recently I've observed about Skift during this chaotic time, and I think I've actually heard you say it a couple of times, is um, finding ways to get money as a business. That's more or less something that all small businesses will.
But isn't that what all of us are trying to do? Yeah, these days is cash. Cash is king. All the cliches you've heard are true.
And it's not, in a lot of cases, it's not the way you were getting money 3 months ago. Can you walk us through your thought process or where your mind goes when you look to these new kinds of income streams? Or is it literally just trying everything and seeing what works?
I think it's a mix of both. I think all of us in the travel industry, and we are not technically a travel company, we're a media company, but obviously we cover the business of travel, so we're in the travel sector. All of us certainly us were in a fetal position for, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
probably second half of Feb to early March when all of this was shutting down. Obviously, we were covering the headlines, etc. But, we lost 80% of our business for March and April. But
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty much true for anybody in the industry, right? I
Right.
don't I don't think that's unusual. Maybe 100% for some folks. We're in travel and we do events. It can't be more bullseye than that. Events is 40% of our revenues. And so all of those events stopped. We had big plans of growing this year. 40% revenues growth this year was planned. That's a big number in year 8 organically.
Mm-hmm.
Much of it was based on physical events. So you can imagine what happened to that. Virtual events is what we've pivoted to. You've seen us do, again, with very high metabolism. We went through the pain like any travel company. We have had to make cuts. That was emotional, that was painful. The only thing was we moved a little earlier than other business sectors, only because we were in travel and we knew this was coming. And as
Mm-hmm.
soon as China hit, we knew this was going to be bad for travel. So we moved quickly on that. I think we have a month over a lot of other companies in general business sectors on that front.
Mm-hmm.
We've had to make all kinds of cuts in costs and team, etc. But one of the things that we tried to make sure is to not cut editorial and research. It's the lifeblood of our company. It is the engine that is our engine of recovery on the other end of this, whenever we get to the other end of this. Our quality has to hold up now, because if we're not there for the industry today in the ways that we can be, which is reliable news, insights, analysis, research, events for this sector that's battered and looking for clarity. If we're not there for them today, why should they be there for us on the other end of it? We get our money from the industry. Today, they may not have that, but at some point, they will start spending again. So, how do we quickly do online virtual events? Doesn't have to be polished. And these days, as you very well know, we just established none of us are in a polished state. How can we give more clarity? How can we give more clarity to what's happening? So, we are doing 1 to 2 virtual events a week. These are anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours, actually a couple of them 3-hour events. We were going to launch a subscription service in Skift. So this was going to be a paywall like the New York Times, 3 to 5 articles a month. After that, you get asked to pay. These are the general stories that you read on Skift. And we said now is not the right time. We were going to launch in March. But it's for industry that's battered, it just doesn't make sense to restrict our crucial coverage for them. And so we quickly pivoted to voluntary contributions, much like Guardian does, where if you value our independent journalism and our voice and our work, help support our journalism in these times. And that's been successful. I mean, that resonated a lot. Thank you, Matt, for your support. I appreciate that. I know you're part of the people that care about our existence. So that's been incremental. It's not going to save the company, but it certainly gives us a sense of the possibilities of continuing voluntary contributions. We also pivoted on our events on virtual, I mentioned, but we're not charging for these events, not yet. We are doing pay what you want. So again, a lot of people don't have the ability to pay for these events today, but for people who do, it's pay whatever you want, $20, $10, $50, $100 if you want for these events.
Can we touch on for just a second this engine that sits beneath a lot of this, which is your email list / newsletter? There's a lot of people listening to this who are in the vacation rental sector who have put newsletters on the back burner for many, many years.
Yeah.
Occasionally they'll send out something with promotions, but talk to us about what building that list has allowed you to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've always spent my life in email. Email is, every few years there's a new story about like, oh, email is the new in thing. Well, it's been around for 25 at this point, 30 years. And so email newsletters have been the workhorse of the media world for 25 years now. And I've been doing newsletters since even the blog started initially as a newsletter, then went into a blog and my first company. That daily touch point with our readers and our audience, the ability to be able to set agenda in the email inbox every morning for this industry has been a powerful thing. And I remember people when my first company, Paid Content, a lot of people that I met in real life later or at conferences, etc., said that they used to wake up with me, which essentially meant that it was our newsletter that they read first thing in the morning. So that's a similar philosophy that we have at Skift, which is potentially be able to set agenda in this industry. I know, like in politics, Politico does this thing where they want to set the agenda for the day. I mean, they may not, but that's their philosophy.
Are you starting to think that with these changes, I mean, engagement, the buzzword of engagement has always been vague and esoteric.
Yeah.
Are you starting to view the way that we engage with our clients differently moving forward?
I think there's a sense of all of us being in it together. And I know there's such a cliche and everybody says it. And I wish there's a way to bottle it up and figure out how to use that general sense of openness about sharing. Sharing of the problems of different companies. I'm sure this is very much true in the vacation rental sector. Competitors that normally wouldn't talk, or even in allied industries that wouldn't talk, are more open to sharing issues, whether these are internal, employee issues, or loans, or business issues, sales issues, to external. For instance, in my B2B media world, I've been talking to a lot of B2B media company CEOs, founders, etc., just as a support group. And in travel, even though we are, as a media company, a neutral source in this industry, we're not there as an evangelist for this industry. But there's this sense that if everybody's betting against travel, I think we're in it for the long term. Like somebody asked me the other day, what are you going to do? Are you going to add other sectors because travel is screwed for a while? I said, no. I mean, this is the sector that I've bet my life on, so I'll continue to have Skift focus on the sector. And when the industry does come back, we'll be very well positioned.
It does say, it speaks to our broader ability to actually form relationships with people in a very challenging time. I've noticed a lot of vacation rental managers are spending 10, 30 minutes, even 60 minutes on the telephone with a guest talking through what could be some challenges. And that's almost like a new kind of metric that would be completely unreasonable to them pre-pandemic. And even something like a podcast, I've always been fascinated how people will sit down and listen to a 50-minute podcast while they're planting their flowers and listening to you, and it's like they're waking up with you, like you said. It brings that humanity and that relationship back to the forefront.
A lot of people have mentioned it, but I do think that if it claims back parts of humanity that we lost, that would be amazing. But the skeptical journalist part of me says it's probably not going to happen. But I just wish a lot of things we will, when we come out of this, we will miss parts of it very quickly. That's for sure.
I want to harness the skeptical journalist in you for a second. I would like your perspective from top down on what the broader travel sector tends to think about the short-term rental movement. Like, what are the main pieces of that? We know Airbnb. Yeah. And by the way, did you enjoy your conversation with Brian Chesky the other day?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's an intense guy who has built this giant force in the world with the sheer dent of his intensity. And you could agree with it, you could not agree with it, but
he did it.
as somebody who's covered startups and founders for a long time, what you bring, the energy you bring to bear on what you build, um, has a huge part in being successful in it. I think there, with all the, I mean, I'm not giving you an original analysis of Airbnb. All the, all the words that could have been written have been written on Airbnb, but I think that they definitely, in the larger consumer world, have created a part of the industry that didn't exist before. They've made it more seamless than it ever was, and they've changed how a good part of the world travels. And so I'm aware enough of the wrinkles below it, which is all the issues of Airbnb in cities. We were the first one at Skift in 2013. We, like, a few months after we launched, 2012. Jason, my co-founder, editor-in-chief back then, did a story on Airbnb and New York City. This is 2012, fall of 2012. We launched in July. I think he did in September, October, on the good, bad, and ugly scenarios of Airbnb in New York City and what that means. And it was a story that put us on the map, because there was a very detailed investigation of, like, the good, bad, and worst cases of Airbnb in cities. New York as a mirror to the larger issues of cities. Nobody was asking hard questions of Airbnb back then. In fact, Brian and others in Airbnb were really angry at us for years because they thought we had an agenda against them. We didn't. All we had was, if nobody else was asking hard questions, just, we were asking questions. Forget hard
Right.
questions. Nobody was asking them real questions. And so by asking what is their effect on cities was novel thing back then.
Right.
And, in fact, this Airbnb interview that I did with Chesky was the first interview he's given to Skift in 8 years of our existence.
Wow.
Um,
They were holding a
and
grudge.
so, well, I mean, I think they've come around on that. I think by the sheer force of our reporting on Airbnb, fair, I would say, good parts, bad parts, they've come around. And so, so I think, I can see your issues with his interview, but I also, admire the place that they've created for themselves and how us as consumers have benefited from it. Yes, there are negative effects of it also, but my whole traveling life has changed since Airbnb came along. I wasn't a
Yeah.
vacation rental.
Ditto.
I didn't have the money. I was too young, or I don't know, whatever. I didn't have the money to use vacation rentals before. Our son was born 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago now. So after he was born, certainly our family travels has always been a short-term rental, always. It's been mostly Airbnb. I would say probably one or two times home away, maybe one time, one fine stay, not direct, but through these platforms.
And I'm totally with you in terms of all the wonderful things that company has unlocked for both the short-term rental industry and the general consumer public. Do you think, in terms of positioning, and now I want to shift a little bit to professional vacation rental managers who I work with mostly, and do indeed use Airbnb as a channel for bookings, but it's one of many OTAs that they use. In fact, the OTAs are one of several marketing legs that they lean on to grow their businesses. Do you think that the professional vacation rental management uh, community is positioned differently post pandemic, either better or worse?
I would say better.
Mm-hmm.
I would say better. I think that, there's some, I'm sure you've seen the same headlines, and these are media headlines, so they don't talk about in terms of vacation rentals. They talk about in terms of Airbnb, because in their mind it's all Airbnb.
Right.
Is there a future for Airbnb? There was a Wired story last week,
Yeah.
or the week before. Of course it is. The people who were predisposed to vacation rentals and Airbnb type outlets before will continue to be. The people who were predisposed to hotels before this were to continue to be. The people that were predisposed to mix of both, which is probably a lot of people, will continue to be. It's a matter of, I in fact think that professionally managed vacation rentals that are professionally cleaned will probably be the first accommodation to come back. As things start to open up, you may already been seeing some of that early activity or Airbnb might be in the from their data in, let's say, summer and beyond. And because drive distance travel, this is some of the things that we've been talking about. Local or drive distance travel seems to be the one that will come back earliest. We'll get some early evidence of it in the coming weeks as US states open. If I can get in my car, have my cleaning supplies with me, this is very key. I think all of us will be traveling with cleaning supplies
Yeah.
For a while to come, even when we fly. Like, no longer will you look at the person who cleans the back of the seat as crazy. Remember, we used to have that before, and we think, why is this person so upset?
Right. Yeah. Frankly, I always used to look at people in the airports who are wearing masks. I was like,
Yeah,
wonder why they're doing that.
yeah,
But it's now making me look like the dummy.
I know. So I think control over personal space and having less people around and having vacation rentals in places that are less crowded, which is, you would typically expect that to be the case. It won't be boom time, but it will be business that they didn't have before that they lost. And so
Mhm.
I think they're actually well positioned. The key there is, much like hotels are now, I'm sure you've seen Marriott and Accor and these other big chains have come out with clean initiatives, and they're going to have the seal and guarantee, and et cetera, et cetera. How does a fragmented, smaller business focused sector like vacation rentals communicate that to the users?
Yeah, in a singular voice that really can be grasped. And shout out to VRMA, which is our industry management association, who just came out with Safe Home, which is a kind of brand and set of guidelines for vacation rental professionals. A good first step.
I think
Yep.
that's very much needed. Yeah.
When learning a new language, people often use the word fluent. How fluent are you means how accurately can you communicate yourself. And fluency applies to technology too. How technologically fluent are you means how is your business utilizing all the tech at your disposal to achieve your goals? How well are you expressing yourself through technology? When it comes to cleaning, for instance, tech fluency means using technology to ensure safe, clean, high-quality properties for every single guest in the wake of this pandemic. Breezeway combines deep learning technology with mobile-first task management. That basically means that your team members, no matter where they are, in the office, in the car, inside of a property, getting it done, Breezeway automates those operations and gives you confidence that every property will be ready for the next day. In this case, tech fluency is about complementing your most precious asset. That's your team and their judgment. It's about closing the communication gap. Tech fluency is about using a tool to enhance all of that. Breezeway has been helping over 400 managers transform the way they care for properties and best respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Its founder, Jeremiah Gall, has been in the game as long as anybody. He was the founder of FlipKey. He has a sense for the kind of technology that can empower independent businesses. Head over to breezeway.io to learn more. When it comes to maintenance, how often are you scrambling to send somebody out to a property in the middle of the night, or worse, on one of their days off, to do something menial like replace a key? In this new post-coronavirus world, guests are going to be especially on edge with human-to-human interaction. And in this case, tech fluency means doing the things that humans could be doing, but doing it much more quickly, much more efficiently, and as it relates to your business, much less expensively. Point Central is the leader in business-grade smart property solutions for managers. They're increasing property safety. They're reducing operational costs, and they are improving guest satisfaction. This is an example of using technology only when it enhances the experience for both the guest and the business that is hosting them. Sometimes people get confused and think to themselves, tech is all about you. But when tech can solve both sides of the puzzle with things like water leak detectors HVAC analytics, humidity sensors, smart locks, smart thermostats to keep people from jacking up the air conditioning. That is what a vacation rental business of the future looks like. Point Central is offering safety services like smoke, carbon monoxide, and intrusion monitoring. So head over to pointcentral.com/VRMB to learn more. If you had to invest in a new travel niche moving forward, based on some trends that you are looking at from a consumer standpoint, is there any little pocket that you think has especially exciting potential?
From a consumer, not B2B.
Yeah, for a consumer, yeah.
For a consumer thing. How do you make remote travel more accessible to people? This is, by the way, top of mind thought, so take it for what it is. If less crowded travel is what everybody wants to do for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe that becomes a permanent part of our psyche. Tour operators, etc., that focus on making it more accessible than just the bucket list type travel. There seems to be some potentially space there and vacation rentals definitely play a big part in that type of more less crowded travel. I see that's a space that either existing tour operators or new companies or new platforms could emerge from that. So that's an interesting, I think, one. And I do think that this is a chance for independent businesses, especially small businesses. There's an awareness, I think, especially in the US and other parts of the world, that independent small businesses are the ones that are hurting the most. And that there's this sense of solidarity among consumers or travelers or just people with smaller businesses because they've been hurt. Like, no, we are, I think for the first time in a long time, very attuned to a 5 to 10 block radius. This is particularly true in cities around where we live. I live in New York City. I'm very attuned to the 5 to 10 block radius around my house here because we're locked into our place. And I think if you take that into concentric circles of like, can that sense of awareness about local, I've been using the phrase radical localism, which is not my phrase, it some other people have coined it, and I just happened to come across it, is an interesting one that I think that potentially we can take it away from here, which is how does an awareness of supporting small businesses continue from here that may have been ignored or may have been swept aside in the scale age.
Yeah, I like to think that when all of the rules have been sort of turned upside down and all of the conventional obstacles that were blocking people from realizing ideas, if all of those are temporarily out of commission for the moment, it really does boil down to independent creators, local companies that supply your bread or supply your local services. Those are typically the first ones to lean on and to rebuild a society. And before I ask my last question, I know there will be people listening to this who, when I asked that question of what niche you would invest in next, and you said B2B, and I said no, they will be like, why did you turn away from that? So what would be your answer in terms of what travel niche you'd look at investing in on a B2B side before we move on?
I think, there are few. I would say scaled customer service. I think big companies have realized these types of situations, even though will not come around too often, but when they come, they really bring the house down. So I think scaled do-it-yourself customer service solutions, finally investing in it 25 years into the internet era, is probably an area that would make sense going ahead.
What does that mean?
Scale meaning like that means that the breakpoints that happen, as you know, over February, April, March, were phone calls and people not being able to get through to the customer service lines of these giant companies. Well, how do you do it better the next time? How do you have policies that now will be, I don't know, pandemic proof, but certainly learn from this pandemic? And so I think customer service companies that are focused on these sectors in travel potentially would be good. Another sector we've been exploring at Skift is automation. And what does that mean? whether it's cleaning or safety or back of the house, any type of back of the house. Less front of the house, I would say back of the house in accommodations and operations across different travel companies. I would say those would be interesting. I bet many of them are either being dreamed of right now that we don't even know what that, we can't even imagine today what that would look like, in 2, 3, 5 years from now.
Right.
Things that we wouldn't have imagined now would potentially come across. It would definitely be very, very key in your sector, which is, automated cleaning and disinfecting or safety solutions for the vacation rental sector. I would bet that would be a good market.
It's really interesting you say those two things. One of the other interviews for this season of the podcast is Chip Conley. And Chip said his two things were one, and this is for independent owners and managers to begin thinking about, preemptive measures for how to avoid problems moving forward. The independent owner or manager who shows that they have thought through all of those things and has a plan wins. And his second one was an level of automation that takes advantage of smart thermostats and takes advantage of the ability to turn on music in a vacation rental upon arrival. So I'm starting to sense some really neat overlaps there. My last question for you, Rafat, has to do with your ability to start a business, to grow it to a certain point, and then to exit that business. And most independent owners and managers get started accidentally in our space. They did not necessarily even have a business plan. A lot of them are taking advantage of this moment to write one. But there is a certain danger if you don't have a goal of an end point, like an exit, like you would do in the media business, that you kind of get lost and you don't have that compass to calibrate. Can you give some advice to independent owners or managers who maybe don't have an exit plan for their vacation rental business, but could benefit from beginning to think that way?
I could actually recommend at least one book, and the second book I'm blanking on the name, but it's the same author, so you look at it. So it's a book called Small Giants.
Ooh, I love it already.
Yeah, Small Giants. It's focused on small businesses who've been there for the long term and the lessons you can learn from them. The same author, I'm forgetting the author's name, but if you look at his other books, you will see it. Had a book on, and that's not the title, but it's something along the lines of how to position yourself to sell your business. And it's not a book at all about selling your business. It's a book about how to run your company the clean way as an operations, financial, logistics, business structure wise. You're building it for the long term. There's some phrase in it that
Oh, I think I might know it. Can I guess it?
Go ahead.
Build your business as if you will own it forever, but could sell it tomorrow?
Exactly. Thank you.
Yes.
I don't know if it was his original thought, but that's certainly one of the phrases that stuck in my brain, has been stuck in my brain since then. So that is the philosophy with which I really think anybody should build their small businesses, particularly, which is invest if you can early on right structure, right financial health, particularly. And I've been lucky. My CFO has been my CFO now for 15 years. My first company, this is Michael Kniff was my CFO in my first company. He's also in my second company. Invest if you can on finance, the right type of financial advice. Second, invest if you can on design, which is design helps you punch above your weight. If you're a small company, a good sense of design makes you look much bigger. People have a better sense of comfort with it. So these are two things I always advise businesses or entrepreneurs when they start, which is invest in right financial advice structure, and then second, invest in design.
And design is what the user encounters when they come in contact?
User interface, and Skift had a very modern sense of design in 2012. The site looks a lot different now than it used to. Even the logo and everything has changed since then. But we didn't look like a boring B2B media site that was there 8 years ago. A lot of them were, and many of them still are. We had a sense of freshness about it. That was the word that was used about us a lot, even now. That was in good part a result of us investing whatever little money we had back then in proper design and like a French modern sense of look. And I'm sure there are lessons equivalent in the vacation rental world, which is, having the right sense of design helps you punch above your weight, however small you are.
And that second layer of being profitable, of having that clear finances, gives you the ability to sell, or gives you the ability to take some time off, puts you in a position to take advantage of all the hard work that you have put in. That's wonderful advice.
Yeah.
Well, Rafat, this has been just such a treat, and I was looking forward to this for the last week, and just really appreciate your leadership and also taking the time to share some of that wisdom with our vacation rental community. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you again.
I hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as I did having it. The episode was produced by Tammy Rowe and Stuart Hooper of Mango Fish Studios. Our intro song is The Moon of Pajang by Instant Party. And if you feel inspired, please consider sharing to social media with your big takeaway. We love takeaways. They make us feel great. Lastly, if you want to receive updates, you can do so at vrmb.com/mmm. And if you want to join our virtual community of vacation rental professionals, become a member of VRMB's Inner Circle today. Until next time.